Welcome back. Now we are going to start session number 1, which is the pre-proposal preparation. But before starting formally the pre-proposal preparation, I have a couple of tips for you. Before you actually write down your proposal, read your proposal guidelines carefully. This is very important. There is some important information that you need to look at your proposal guideline, or usually when the funding organization announce it in the newspaper or on their website. So there are some key information that you need to keep an eye on. For example, what are the submission deadlines? What are the eligibility criteria? What sort of format that you need to follow? Sometimes different funding organizations have their own standard format, or we may call it a template they have prepared. So they usually ask you to adopt that template and write down your proposal accordingly. But the point here is that whatever the standard that they have, whatever the format or the template that they want to adopt, the key elements that we'll be discussing in this course are more or less the same that usually goes on any standard proposal. Right? So you also need to keep an eye on what is the review timetable, what are the budget limits. Usually they give you a maximum limit, whom to contact, and other submission requirements. So here, before starting your proposal, you need to look at these kind of important information. Alright? Now, the first objective in session 1 is analyze and understand the funding environment and the type of foundations. Right? Now, the funding environment. As you have seen that many different social organizations have been registered these days, as well as different government spendings have been cut as well. So it means that since the number of social sector organizations are increasing and the government spendings are reducing, therefore a competition is increasing among different social sector organizations for funding, for the grants. As a result, the organizations are now more focused, and especially what they want, that they have a strong desire to make every cent count. They want to make the most out of whatever they are investing in a certain project. They are also interested in increased accountability, and their accountability systems and their verification systems are now becoming more stringent. So their increased emphasis on effective governance and management, as well as they also would like to now specific their funding on particular specialized areas. So their emphasis are basically project specific funding, and they don't usually fund on different generic kind of projects. So they want you to be very focused, straightforward, to the point, time bound, and narrow down your area of interest. Their expectations are also that groups who have similar objectives will work together. And by that I mean that such funding organizations, they expect you to share resources and expertise so that you can reduce the duplication and you bring the right people to the right place and work together as a team. So what happened, I'll give you an example for this particular point, is in 2010, there were huge floods in Pakistan, and many social sector organizations ran after funding. Now, obviously, since the emergency was very large scale, where two of the major provinces, the biggest provinces of Pakistan, Punjab and Sindh, they got distracted. People were displaced, all their crops were destroyed, their homes were destroyed, they were totally homeless. So there were many challenges there. So the funding organizations immediately started funding the projects. But where the problem came, that there was no systematic approach of which area should be covered by which particular social sector organization. So there was a need of a central role or a central place where different organizations come together and they share information that, okay, ABC organization is going in that particular village or city or area, and XYZ should go in this area. So there were a lot of duplications of resources, and a lot of cases were reported that in some villages 5 or 6 social sector organizations and NGOs were working for the same kind of problems, whereas in other areas not even one organization reached there. So people suffered a lot. So now organizations expect you to work together and minimize duplication. They also would like you to emphasize on sustainability. For example, if the tenure for that particular project, if it expires, how can you sustain the project for the long run? So this point also is very key for the project approval. And the last point, which is very key for approval of the project, is also the cross-sectoral collaborations. So different organizations, the NGOs, the government sector, the education sector, the private sector, they can come collaborate with each other and they work towards certain common goals. So the collaboration is also a key. And if you are collaborating with certain organizations where they have strengths in some areas which you don't have, that will be a plus point towards your project. Right? So this was the first objective that we covered, and I'm going to discuss the next objective in the next slide.